and I never heard anything about them, even though I knew they existed. Later, I saw them, and they were fucking amazing. I said, yeah, let's do them, when that name came up while we were doing this. They fucked up really, really well. It was said that Tom Araya's screams about death, Satan, blood, and madness were so loud that they could shut down the devil. After that, he was gone. No long goodbye tour, and no shocking autobiography. There was no podcast with deep thoughts. There was just a man leaving the stage quietly without saying anything. People saw him years later in Texas, where he was riding a horse, feeding cows, taking care of chickens, and planting flowers. No one recognized him as the scary thrash metal voice from the past. For what reason? Since they screamed about hell every night. Why would someone choose to be quiet before dawn? If Tom Araya, the symbol who carried Slayer for almost 40 years, turned his back on the spotlight without feeling any sorrow, why? What did he lose, see, and feel when he ran away to a field as if he had never been there? That snarling bass that sounded like a demon's heartbeat, and those razor-sharp eyes hide a truth that no one has fully told. So we can understand that man, we need to start at the beginning. A little boy from Chile who loved the Beatles, and who no one thought would one day make the whole world shake with his scream. Beginnings. In Vina del Mar, Chile, on June 6, 1961, Tomás Enrique Araya Diaz was born. Vina del Mar is a beautiful beach city. This boy's childhood wasn't connected to the sea, though. It had something to do with moving, losing, and still feeling like you didn't fit anywhere. His family left their home country when he was 5 years old, taking 2 small children and a fragile dream with them. They went to Southgate, California, where Latino immigrants had to work twice as hard just to be half recognized. The man who raised Tom worked in a leather studio. His mom worked as a maid. No time for art, and definitely no room for music that was supposed to be rebellious. But what happened to Tom in that small house in a poor area changed everything. His brother Cisco. Chippy played the guitar. Each brother would play music by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and later Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath after school. Tom's first bass wasn't meant to make him famous. He only did it to help his brother. There was no way anyone could have known that the quiet kid in the background had a creative force strong enough to shake an entire genre. Tom wasn't active. He wasn't an especially good student. His peers made fun of him because he was quiet and appeared to be off, had an unusual last name, and was an immigrant. Nevertheless, he didn't need friends. A place where the sound could speak for him and a bass. In that way, a Chilean boy became the most dangerous thing in thrash metal, even though he himself didn't see it coming. Beginners in their careers. Before Tom Araya yelled about death, he used to save lives. You're not using a metaphor there. Wearing a mask, he worked in a hospital, suctioning mucus, checking oxygen levels, and putting tubes into patients. Araya started working as a respiratory therapy worker at Brand Medical Center after finishing a training program. Day to day, he saw both life and death. Few people knew that when he got home from the hospital, he'd plug in his amp, pick up his bass, and scream angry songs about war and genocide. Tom once said that he decided to be a doctor because it was stable and useful, but his heart was in something else. Araya had 2 lives going at the same time while his friends were trying to get work or get into college. Every day I heal, and at night I scream. That conflict made him stronger, not weaker. When garage practices for Slayer began, Araya wasn't some wild rebel or street punk. He was the only one who had a steady job and bucks to put away. And he did that right away. Slayer was getting ready to make their first album, Show No Mercy, in 1983, but no one in the band had enough money to pay for studio time. In silence, Araya used his hospital paycheck, money he got by working hard and losing blood, sweat, and tears, to pay for the whole recording. Although they were a small group, they helped make wild music popular all over the world. Without Tom Araya, Slayer might have stayed in Southgate as just another house band. But he took a chance. For a type of music that didn't follow any rules, they played with the skill of someone who used to hold a breathing tube. He then turned around and never looked back, taking over Slayer. That afternoon in 1981, Kerry King called Tom Araya. Araya had no idea that he was about to change the past of heavy metal. It all started with, "I have a band. We need to add a bass player. Are you interested in trying it?" At that time, Araya was working at a hospital in Los Angeles, where he was tracking lung pressure and helping people who were having trouble breathing. Despite wearing a mask and clothes, He said yes because he loved music so much that he would give up anything for it. The first time Slayer practiced, it was in a hot garage with broken amps and a drum kit that was worse than a high school band's. But a wild energy was rising in that stuffy air. Dave Lombardo, Kerry King, and Jeff Hanneman played like the devil was after them. Tom Araya stood in the middle, calm and quiet. When he spoke, the walls seemed to break. One person did not teach Araya how to sing that way. Without thinking, he screamed in a rough, guttural sound that was different from anything else around at the time. Like the cry of a soul that had been on the edge of life and death in a hospital. It wasn't pretty or beautiful, but it was real. After that, Slayer had found its last piece. Slayer did not have a record company or a sponsor. No one wanted to put money into a band that played fast songs about Satan, the Holocaust, and blood. After that, what did they do? Their first record was made by them. The only one who had a steady job and money was Araya. He used his hospital pay to pay studio fees, press records, and rent a van to carry his gear to gigs. He wasn't saving for a house or retirement. Making that choice wasn't careless. There was a quiet kind of sacrifice involved, picking between two worlds, comfort and truth. Show No Mercy was created in 1983. Raw sound, crushing riffs, and words full of images of death. There was no relaxing music in this. When you wanted to break down the four walls in your head, you played this. Record companies didn't care about it at first. It wasn't sold in stores, but for a generation of angry people, the underground took it as truth. The outsiders, the teens who were bored, and the kids who didn't fit into pop or dance. Slayer was found by everyone. Despite this, Tom Araya tried to balance both for a while. He worked day shifts at the hospital. He sang about killing at night. But then things went downhill. They were asked to go on tour in Europe. It was their best chance yet. When Araya asked for time off from work, she was turned down. Worse, he had extra shifts planned. Then, one day, after being told he would be fired for not keeping his appointments, Tom Araya stood up, looked his boss in the eye, and said, "Then I'm fired. Okay, good. My full-time job is playing in a band. There is no delay or fuss." A guy who knew where he had to go. Slayer began their first tour in a beat-up van with gear that had been pieced together. They had to sleep in the van, eat instant noodles, and play like the end of the world was coming tomorrow. Media outlets didn't like them, and they weren't on MTV, but fans thought that made them scarier and more legendary. In all early pictures of Slayer, Tom Araya is always in the middle. He doesn't smile or growl. He just stares straight into the camera like he's guarding hell. He wasn't needed to talk. All he had to do was scream. It's possible that Araya set off Show No Mercy's bomb. Thereafter, Slayer was no longer a band that was trying to figure out where it fit in. It was like a storm that had already destroyed the basement and was about to destroy the whole metal world. A successful career. A lot of songs are good. Not all albums are hits, but some records change the way a whole genre works. The third kind is made up of Rain and Blood by Slayer. After two critically acclaimed albums in the underground, Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits, Slayer hit a major turning point in 1986. They signed with Rick Rubin's famous hip-hop label, Def Jam Recordings. This was an unusual way for rap and thrash metal to work together. That had no one expecting it. Rick Rubin was different, but he could hear raw energy. He wasn't there to make Slayer weak. In fact, he helped them turn all of their anger into a sound tool that was more powerful and pure than ever. They didn't think about the market, radio play, or any kind of control when they recorded Rain and Blood. They only thought about one thing. It needs to be pushed so far that no one else can catch up. Angel of Death, the first song, took listeners right to hell from the very first seconds. Tom Araya's long, piercing, air-splitting scream wasn't a welcome. For everyone in the metal world, it was a slap in the face, a statement, and an alarm bell. The song talked about the horrible tests that the notorious Nazi Dr. Joseph Mengele did at Auschwitz. Like how murderers often explain their actions. The songs didn't judge or defend. They just described in a cold, indifferent way. And that made it scarier than any scary book. Right away, people said that Slayer praised Nazism. Chain stores wouldn't carry the record. Some wholesalers changed their minds. CBS Records didn't put it out in the US because they were afraid of what people would think. There was no giving up for Slayer. They were aware that what they were touching was dangerous. That's why they were touching something real in the art. They were rebelling without giving in. Rain and Blood happened in just 28 minutes and 58 seconds. Not long intros or songs to lighten the mood, just 10 tracks that sound like 10 slashes one after the other. Every take is destructive and lightning fast, with guitars that sound like chainsaws and drums that sound like bombs. In the middle, Tom Araya screams as if every take is tearing his soul apart. But what was strange was that this extreme record was Slayer's first big hit in the music business. It made it into the Billboard 200, which was very rare for heavy metal at the time. Even more important, it became a sign that bands like Sepultura, Cannibal Corpse, Slipknot, and Lamb of God would follow. Slayer didn't try to get more people to listen to them after Rain and Blood. They made records that were darker, heavier, and more dangerous, but they didn't write hits, bring in guest artists, or play MTV's game. In the years that followed, South of Heaven, 1988, Seasons in the Abyss, 1990, Divine Intervention, 1994, and God Hates Us All, 2001. Tom Araya remained in the middle of the stage, yelling as if each song were a soul release. Eyes of the Insane, a dark song about PTSD and American soldiers returning from war, won Slayer their first Grammy in 2007. This was after being ignored by the mainstream music business for almost 30 years. Rather than just anger, Araya's speech this time sounded like the voice of a soul twisted by harsh reality. Another Grammy was won the next year for Final Six, a song that was added to the release of Christ Delusion. Award ceremonies were never as important to Araya as the crowd's silence right before he screamed the first word. He didn't need praise. There was enough fear in the crowd's eyes. While the other members of Slayer sometimes got into fights, drinking, or fights within the group, Tom Araya was always there to keep things calm. He didn't give shocking interviews, run for office, or try to be the center of attention. He was the heart of the storm when the music started, though. Slayer toured like they were racing the end of the world from 1986 to the late 2010s. Even though his back hurt, his neck got stiff, and he couldn't sleep, Tom Araya went on stage every night and screamed like he was letting out things that words could never say. Rain and Blood wasn't the only record that made Slayer famous. That mark would never go away on Tom Araya, a man who used to work in a hospital but was now standing in the middle of a metal storm and screaming things most people wouldn't think. To say the least, bad health news and the end of headbanging. There's an unsaid rule in the metal world. Doing headbanging is an important part of living the song. And Tom Araya was the one who made that act into a holy rite. Huge numbers of shows. He hit his head 1,000,000 times to the beat. His back was covered in long hair that was flying around like a steel wind. Not only did Tom Araya sing when the riff started, he threw his whole body into the music. His neck snapped and his shoulders shook, and the crowd screamed along as if they were under a spell. He didn't know he was slowly and brutally paying the price for 20 years of living that way, though. Around the year 2008, Araya's left arm started to feel numb. It started out short, lasting only a few minutes after shows, but later it went on for hours. From his neck down to his shoulder, and then down to his wrist, he felt like needles were going through him. His hands started to shake and slow down while he was playing bass. However, he did not say anything. Don't say anything bad about the tour doctor. In their history, Slayer was in the middle of one of their busiest touring times ever. At least until one night in Europe, when he dropped his pick in the middle of a song, which had never happened before in his career. After that show, Araya asked for a full medical checkup. According to an MRI, he has a serious cervical disc herniation with pinched nerves. If he doesn't have surgery soon, he could lose some use of his arm. Tom Araya had surgery in January 2010. Doctors did a complicated surgery called cervical fusion, in which damaged discs are taken out and replaced with artificial spacers. Metal plates are then used to fuse the bones together. The doctor was fine after the surgery. After a year, you'll be back here hitting your head like before. I think we might not be able to fix it next time. He knew that a surgery had taken away a part of his personality, but he also knew that he had to give up the thing that fans most associated him with if he wanted to live to see his kids grow up and stay on stage for a few more years. Immediately following the operation, Araya loved wearing bass, but he could not do it anymore. A regular strap put the weight of the instrument right on his neck, which hurt and put him at risk of hurting it again. His brother Cisco Araya, who got Tom interested in singing in the first place, gave him the answer. Cisco made a special belt that was shaped like a weightlifter's support belt, but was changed to support the base's lower body and move its weight from the neck to the hips and shoulders, taking pressure off the neck spine. Araya could keep acting because of that belt, which kept her from falling again. The crowd didn't know. While he was on stage, he still had his gear strapped to his base, but under his shirt was a homemade medical support system that was a quiet sign of his strength. In March 2010, Slayer played a show in the US again. The crowd roared, the lights went out, and the drums hit the ground. But when Tom Araya walked out, he stood still. Don't hit your head or lean into the mic. Standing still, with cold eyes and a serious face, he started to sing. At first, some of his friends thought he was sick. Some thought it was a new direction for his art, but by the end of the show, they knew it was how he would act from now on. Strangely, the fact that he was so still made him even scarier. In the chaos, Araya was like a judge reading the judgment to everyone. His howling voice sounded like bottled-up feelings bursting through a single opening. No more headbanging for Araya. But he never said sorry. No justifications. It's not awkward. He only said, "I miss that feeling, but I'm still here," when asked about the change. The chance to scream is still mine. That's all I need. For some artists, that might have been a loss, but for Tom Araya, it was a win for adaptability, fan loyalty, and the need to stay alive. The man who used to hit his head hundreds of times every night stood still in the middle of Slayer's stage. He was a live reminder of how time had hurt him and how he could still shake the world even when he wasn't moving. When Slayer broke up and decided to stop, the Forum in Los Angeles on November 30th, 2019. Blood red lights poured down on stage like a last sacrifice. Slayer, the band whose fast, angry, and hellish songs used to make the whole world go crazy, was playing their last notes at their last show. It had been almost 40 years, and now everything was going to end. The sound stopped after Angel of Death was over. But no one went away. The whole place was frozen. Everyone was unsure of what would come next. Tom Araya then took a step forward. No tears, no awkward goodbyes, and no long thank you speeches. Araya didn't say anything while he stood there and looked at the crowd for a long time. Someone who had finished their journey looked at her. There was nothing wet in his eyes, but they held everything that words couldn't say. Feelings of thanks, sorrow, relief, and an unnameable sadness. Some fans broke down in tears. Others stood still, their hands on the wall. They knew it would be the last time. Thursday, November 30th, 2019. Los Angeles' Forum. Blood red lights poured down on stage like a last sacrifice. Killers, the band whose speed, fury, and words straight from hell used to make the whole world go crazy, was playing their last notes at their last show. It had been almost 40 years, and now everything was going to end. The sound stopped after Angel of Death was over. But no one went away. The whole place was frozen. Everyone was unsure of what would come next. Tom Araya then took a step forward. Not a tear, not a big goodbye, not a long apology. Araya didn't say anything while she stood there and looked at everyone. Someone who had finished their journey looked at her. There was nothing wet in his eyes, but they held everything that words couldn't say. Feelings of thanks, sorrow, relief, and an unnameable sadness. Some fans were crying, while others stood still and gripped the barrier. They knew it would be the last time. For example, Araya said in one of his last interviews, "I've screamed enough. No changes were made to my performance. It's time for me to be quiet and listen to my kids that talk." Slayer didn't have a big reunion show. There was no tribute DVD or live stream. They went on tour, played like the last few years didn't happen, and then they were gone. It was a quiet goodbye, just like Tom Araya had always done things. Absolutely no problems. There was no sorrow or holding on to youth in this man. He just knew when to stop and did so before everything turned into a shadow of itself. Tom Araya was no longer in the news after that goodbye night. There will be no ads, lectures, or talk shows. No one knew but them. He moved back to Texas with his wife, kids, and a big ranch full of cows, chickens, and a few dogs. Undisturbed afternoons without the sound of music. Araya no longer screams. He doesn't must. His screams have already been heard for a long time. Everyday life. Although Tom Araya used to scream about Satan, he was raised as a faithful Catholic. Araya grew up in a traditional Chilean home with a crucifix on the wall, weekly church services, and prayers every night. His parents had no idea that many years later, Their son would be the face of a band that was accused of praising the devil. Strangely enough, though, for Tom Araya, both could live at the same time. Araya kept saying, "I was born and raised Catholic in many appearances. I have a strong faith, but I don't go to church. Rituals are not important to me. My faith only includes believing in God. There is no rebellion or extremism, just a quiet, private, and humble opinion." Araya just smiled when asked about how his faith and Slayer's songs, from South of Heaven to Disciple, seemed to go against each other. That's also part of faith, questioning, not teaching. That is, to face what scares you, not just to believe. Andy Araya and Tom Araya got married in 1995, woman who was by his side when things were worst for Slayer. The two of them weren't a famous couple. Sandra never walked the red carpet. No news stories or conversations. She kept the family together while Araya was traveling the world. In the height of Slayer, they had 2 children, Ariel Asa Araya and Tomas Enrique Araya Jr. One of the main reasons Araya decided to retire was because he missed so many important times of their childhood. A lot of work went into the music. That being said, I now want to give back. As opposed to cash or gifts, give things. My kids and I want to eat breakfast together. It makes me happy to see them grow every day. When Slayer broke up, Tom Araya didn't buy a house, move back to LA, or start a music business. A ranch in Texas, where the land is big and the sky is endless, is a very different choice for him. No one knows him as the man who stood in front of thousands of people in a metal storm before. He takes care of cows, pigs, chickens, ducks, and sheepdogs there every morning with his wife. While he was on tour, Sandra used to take care of everything. It's now his turn to work. There were no helpers or bodyguards, just rough hands and a basic rhythm to life. Tom Araya, the voice of rain and blood, now carefully scoops feed, checks the chicken's water temperature, and leads the cattle back to the barn at dusk. There's no screaming here. Not needed. Most of the time, legends die under the weight of fame, but Tom Araya decided to take a step back and live. He's not flashy rich, but he doesn't need to worry because he's made $15 to $20 million from record shows and selling Slayer gear. Even better, he has something that many artists never do. Be at peace. Not removed because of outstanding debt. Not ruined by drug abuse. Not split up yet. Not needlessly compelled to go back to the stage. All he does is live. That's a bigger win than any Grammy. Leave a legacy and have an impact. In a genre rife with egos on fire, shocking comments, band breakups, and early deaths, Tom Araya stood tall and steady during the shaking. He didn't come up with thrash metal, play bass very well, or write most of Slayer's songs. But he was the voice, the face, and the darkness that Slayer saw the longest when the light hit him. In Slayer's almost 40-year history, Tom Araya was the only member who never left, even when the drummer switched and there were problems with the record label and then Jeff Hanneman's death. He never made demands or lash out without thinking. He also never got involved in politics, was involved in moral problems, or attacked anyone on social media. In a band known for loud and violent music and visuals, Tom Araya didn't need to scream off stage because he knew that the stage was the only place where people could hear him. Araya's scream was more than just a sound. It followed her from Angel of Death to War Ensemble and from Dead Skin Mask to Disciple. An unbreakable scream. Never skipped a beat or missed a word. He made Araya's voice the most important part of a style where singing are usually just filler between riffs and drums. His voice was harsh, angry, and sometimes hopeless. He didn't sound like a lead singer. People who heard him screamed like they were seeing a ghost from their worst fears. It made a lasting impression on their minds. Tom Araya never believed he would become famous. However, it was funny that he became one because he didn't try. Araya is talked about with a strange respect by generations of metal artists, from Lamb of God and Gojira to Code Orange. Not because he was the biggest, but because he seemed the most accurate. Tom is not required to be in charge. Not doing anything. Everything revolves around him. Jesus Christ, Randy Blythe. Critics once didn't like Slayer, they were accused of blasphemy, and they weren't allowed to play. But time has shown that what is real lasts. What made Slayer real was Tom Araya. His scream was never flattering, never trendy, and never said sorry. He looks eerily the same in all of the thousands of live pictures of Slayer that have been taken. There is someone in the middle with cold eyes, a dry smile, and a stance that doesn't want to bow down to anything. He didn't have any hairstyles, expensive clothes, or politician waves. A single, mean-looking look from the stage was enough to make the whole crowd explode. There are no tricks or claims. The thing that makes Tom Araya famous is not how many records he has, but how much respect he has from everyone in the metal world. There aren't that many people who follow him. But when I hear the word Slayer, I immediately think of Araya. Not because he wanted to leave a mark, but because he is the climax of every song Slayer ever wrote about blood and angels. That's Tom Araya. One scream, one stare, and one man who won't move. Even though Tom Araya screamed a lot about dying, he never let himself die in public. He died young, unlike Cliff Burton, and didn't become addicted like Lane Staley. Stayed sober unlike Axl Rose, fought the media, and became a social media joke. He left in a quiet way. Tomas Araya flew through the rough decades of metal like a helicopter going low through a storm, never crashing. It wasn't that he avoided darkness. He sang about it, looked it in the eye, and even hugged it, and then he was at peace again. Artists usually feel like they need to do more, shout louder, and resist harder in order to be seen. But Araya just stood there, and everyone looked at him. He didn't need to teach, fight for justice, or say anything political. His absence was not expressed in words, but through a feeling. When you felt like someone was yelling the things you couldn't say, and then leaving you to face your own truth. In a quiet ranch in Texas, Tom Araya no longer holds a microphone. A shovel is in his hand. No longer does he scream in front of a loud crowd. A chicken that got lost in the trees hears him calling. Just the sound of the wind blowing past the porch every night is enough for him. Thus, the scariest scream in the history of thrash metal became a constant whisper in the minds of fans. It's not necessary to stand in the city to echo or keep performing in order to live. It's a sign that Tom Araya is still there that doesn't need stage lights to shine. Where did Tom Araya's scream first occur to you? When you're alone, on an old cassette tape, or under stage lights that are on fire? Say something. Give your opinion. If you like these kinds of stories, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon. We're nonetheless staying. Storytellers who are afraid to tell others. It's not just tales that we talk about. Rock has never been quiet, so we bring their lives back one word at a time, one note at a time, one step at a time. There's no need for it to be that way because of you.